So for this video, and this video series that this begins, I'm going to do something that I said I wasn't going to do just 2 weeks ago, but I'm not going to do all of it. I'm going to, I think, build a USB device. I've always wanted to build a USB device. Well, not always, but I've recently, in the last 20 years or so, wanted to build my own USB device. And that Megatouch ION that I have has an I/O board that is a USB device. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, basically I just want to create a device that comes up and pretends to be the ION device and maybe answers a few requests. I'm not going to answer all the requests. I'm not going to do everything that the ION board does. I'm not going to give you a solution that replaces the ION board. That said, you know, if anyone wants to take this, whatever work I do, and follow up on it, and do that, be my guest. But I have to do something that is interesting to me, and because I really don't have a lot of time, and so I got to find something that actually interests me to do. And this is something I've actually always wanted to do, and I think other people will enjoy this too. Because I think most people don't think you can do your own USB device. But so I got this this dev kit, this super speed. So it's USB 3.0 super speed dev kit, or Explorer kit as they call it, from Cypress, which I think is now Infineon. I don't know. But basically, let's open it up and see what it is. It says it's a USB assembly, and oh, there's a sticker over the rest. So I don't know. I'm going to open it up and we're going to see what's in there. But it should be a dev kit. It should be some type of CPU board, maybe some cables, and it's going to allow us to build our own USB. It's the base for building our own USB device. So a nice little box here. Here we go. We got the USB dev kit. Tells us how to install the software, how to connect things, and it has interface kits with other things. Okay, so cool. It's got its own USB controller. It looks like it's got some memory and a CPU somewhere. It's got to have a CPU somewhere here. Or the chip itself might be a CPU because it's a microcontroller. So that's probably actually exactly what it is. Here we go. We got it in this case here, or this padding. Looks like, you know, an Arduino kind of hat, if you will. And it's got a USB cable. So we're going to learn a little bit about USB. And then we're going to see if we can actually just do some simple things with this board so it actually comes up, our computer recognizes it. And I would like to, by the end of the video series, which I don't know how many videos I'm going to have it identify itself as the actual Megatouch hardware, and maybe respond to a couple requests, like the request to get the serial number or something. Maybe even read and write data. Maybe I'll make this thing be able to store the key. I don't know. I haven't decided everything I'm going to do yet, and I don't know how hard it's going to be because I've never done it. So hey, I hope you enjoy this. This hopefully will be a fun thing. It's something I'm interested in. I'm kind of tired of, I don't have a lot of time. I have like 0 time. And I'm kind of tired of arcade stuff. I mean, I like arcade stuff, but I'm kind of tired of making arcade repair videos. So I think this would be fun. I think this would be really fun. So I hope you guys will enjoy it. The first step we need to do is try to install the ION software in a VM. And it's probably not going to work. But I think one of the goals, maybe the goal I'll set for this, is just so that we plug the USB board that we're creating into our virtual machine, it can pass the checks such that it starts installing. Therefore, we actually have to get a virtual machine up and running. As I said, I could do this with the real hardware, but I'm going to do this in this virtual machine instead because it's way easier to video and it's just easier to develop in virtually than a real physical piece of hardware. So in the next few steps, I'm going to set up a VMware virtual machine and map in the Megatouch ION 2014 installer image. So create a new virtual machine. Just choose the default. And in this case, we're going to load the operating system later. Choose CentOS 5X 32-bit, because that's what the ION 2014 was running. and next. Just give it any name you want. Next. One processor. 512 megs memory is what they recommend. Megatouch, that is. Default, 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 and default. And I think we need to have at least 20 gigs. So I think I put 20 gigs there. Give it a file name. Finish. And now all we have to do is map the CD. So edit virtual machine settings to point to the boot CD or the install CD that we have, the image that we have on our computer. And now let's boot it up. Okay, so as I thought, it didn't install. It's actually failing way before the I/O card because it's having problems with the video card display, basically the display. So I checked to see if we could get a terminal with using what's called a virtual terminals, and they aren't any set up. So we're going to need to actually figure out how to modify the install CD such that we can get a command prompt, so we can further debug this. So in this step, what we're going to do is we're going to take the ISO installer image, copy it into another Linux virtual machine, extract it, look through the software, basically the install image, and see what's going on. Look at the programs and the scripts to see what's happening when it's installing, to see the easiest way to get a shell. And then we'll have to actually create a new ISO image with whatever changes we need, so that we can then actually get a shell when that error happens and try to work around it. That's the easiest way, in my opinion, to go about this. So this is actually a really good thing to do if you've never done this before, if you've never extracted Linux installer and then recreated a new one. It's something useful. So here's my virtual machine. I've copied the installer ISO, the disk 1, into this directory. You can see it's right there. And now I'm just I created this directory mntcd. I'm gonna mount this using what's called a loopback to mntcd. That is, I'm gonna make that ISO image actually a file system. It's gonna be read-only though. Okay, so you can see I now mounted it. And we have a couple files in here. In this directory isolinux, we have this file initrd, isolinux.bin, isolinux.config, ldlinux.sys, and vmlinux. Initrd is the file we're going to be interested in. It's a compressed archive file, a file that's called a CPIO file. It's an old Unix archive file. So we're going to, and this has actually the file system and the data that that's going to run from the CD. So what we're going to do is actually extract it and then look through it. We're going to extract this directory called mnt bulk megatouch installer root. So here's how we do it. zcat redirect, that's a less than symbol, mmt cd isolinux initrd, that's the file itself. And then we're going to pipe that to cpio -i, which will extract it right here for us. Now, when we move into that directory, we'll see there's actually a bunch of directories and files. So the init file is the file that actually runs when the system boots, after the kernel is done booting. It's just in this case, it's just a shell script. So let's look to see what it does. So basically, it's got all these different options depending on what's called a run level. And most of them are the same. But it's going to run these shell scripts. Looks like most of them are going to run a shell script called init module. Actually, it's a part of this shell script. Init cd, install init, install xinit, and then some of them will run bash. Now the ones that run bash, I'm interested in, because we can, rather than modify anything in the system itself, we can simply just boot into one of these run levels rather than default, which should be 5. So that's, I think, what we're going to do. We're going to modify the system boot process so that we can override it and jump into this run level 4, which will do everything we need and then give us a shell. So the file that we're interested in editing to change the boot process is in this isolinux directory called isolinux.cfg. And basically all we need to do is change this value prompt to equal 1 and timeout to be not 0. And what will happen is that will actually give us some time when the system boots. Rather than automatically going through the defaults, it will let us override them, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to manually be able to type in the options that we want. And the option we want is going to be to boot into level 4. However, to do that, we actually have to copy everything to a new directory, because the file, the boot config file, actually we never extracted. That's just being read off of that read-only copy of that ISO file. So we're going to copy everything to this new directory, mnt bulk new installer, and then we're going to edit the file, and then we're going to make a new ISO file from that and boot from it. So I made this directory. I'm copying all the files from that mmtcd, which is just the ISO directory that is with the loopback mount, what we called it. And now it's going to copy into this new directory, and then we'll be able to edit the files and then make a new ISO from those files. So it's done copying. Let's move to that directory. We're going to go into isolinux, and we're going to edit that config file. And we're going to change prompt to 1 and the timeout to, let's say, 30. Great. Now let's run the command that allows us to make an ISO from files. Make ISOFS -o, and then the output file. This is going to be our new ISO file. -b, the directory isolinux, and then the binary isolinux.bin. -c, directory isolinux boot.cat. It's actually going to create that file. Then the option no emule boot, and then boot load size 4, and boot info table -j -r. Those are capitals, -v, and that's just going to be a label. I'm just going to call it BION 2014, and then space dot. Okay, it's done. Now I'm going to change the file name because I forgot to put the ISO extension. You don't need it, but it helps me remember that it's an ISO file. So I'm going to change it. And then I need to copy that to my computer that was running my virtual machine. So there we go. It's going back to my desktop basically, because then now we're going to boot from that instead. Okay, so now let's reconfigure that virtual machine that we made earlier to boot off of this new ISO rather than the original Megatouch ION 2014 installer ISO. So we're just going to go into the CD option and change that. So let's choose our new ISO file, click OK, and then go ahead and boot it. And here it goes. Now here we get to override how the kernel boots. So we're going to type vmlinux space initrd equals initrd, which is the normal options that were already included, then space 4 to get into that run level 4. So now it's booting. Hopefully we'll go into a run level 4 and we'll have a shell. And yep, there we go. We have a shell. So great. Now we can start actually debugging things and figuring out what's going on and getting the display to actually work correctly, which is going to be needed before we can even get to the IO board part. Okay, in the next video, we'll take it from here and try to actually see if we can get it to start installing up until at least it fails to detect the IO board.